A new study by Atra, the Center for Rabbinic Innovation, is out. It looks at the changing face of the rabbinate, so of course we have to get into that. But before that, museum exhibits in Winnipeg and Jewish organizations under scrutiny from the CRA. Canada's really hopping this week. I'm Avi Feingold, and along with Yedida Eisenstadt and Matthew Leibel, we are not in heaven. How's everybody doing?
Pretty good, besides for the mic on my computer not working. So, thanks for bearing with me.
Technical problems, whatever. We'll make those work. Are you cooking for Thanksgiving?
I am not cooking for Thanksgiving. I am very happy to accept invitations elsewhere and bring something.
It's like a crazy time when you live in the States. I was telling my dad, who's vacationing down there right now or wintering or whatever, and 80 million people travel this week in the United States. That's the number he told me that he heard?
Which is why
that's
the government
crazy for Canadians to understand. Yeah.
Matthew Leibel, what is going on in Winnipeg these days?
There's a little bit of a story that the Jewish community is watching. You may have seen this involving the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. You saw this?
I heard a little bit about it. Tell me more.
That, I guess, last week, there was an announcement that an exhibit's going to be installed or opened, and it's called Palestine Uprooted, Nakba Past and Present. That's the name of the exhibit, and it was announced last week that this is going to open in June. The Jewish Heritage Center of Western Canada made an announcement that they aren't partnering with the museum on a program they were going to do for International Holocaust Remembrance Day in January because they feel they feel like the relationship between the Jewish community and the museum is broken or in peril at the very least because no one from the Jewish community was consulted on this exhibit. And the argument from that side is that a huge part of the historical accuracy and the viewpoints of Jewish refugees are being omitted, and that it's painting a very one-sided picture, and this is particularly dangerous for a national museum. This is the argument. And, of course, on the other side, they're saying that the Nakba, if you just one of the exhibits talking about being one of the most important events in modern history, and that it shapes Palestinian culture all over the world, and so it needs to be told. So that's kind of what's engulfed the community because a lot of people involved with the Jewish Community Federation, CJA, are very opposed to this exhibit opening, and so there have been meetings and there's surveys. And it reminds me, they did this – the last time I saw CJA mobilized like this was when there was that kerfuffle with TIFF, with the film festival. And CJA kind of was successful with that, so I'm curious to see how that will go. But that's kind of the facts of what's going on. So as you can imagine, probably a lot of people have strong opinions on this exhibit. It's polarizing.
I have some get me in trouble questions. So obviously the Palestinian narrative hits a lot of Jewish nerves. I am very familiar with the Jewish story of the 20th century and the Holocaust and Zionism and the relationship and all of that. And I am personally less familiar with the Palestinian narrative. I am kind of at a loss, and I think you guys are going to help me with this, of why we as a Jewish community think that we have editorial influence over the Palestinian narrative.
I think that's part of the argument in favor of the exhibit. I think would be the place where we would start with that. I think that it's because in this situation, the argument is that the telling of this story is problematic because of the way it doesn't tell the full story. It doesn't tell the Jewish story. And given the timing, it will exacerbate the rise in anti-Semitism by continuing to portray Israel as this colonizing, genocidal monster in the way that this story is told. I don't think it's the telling of the story that's the problem. And I know your question was why do we? Because the stories are linked, and unfortunately in so many places, the internet, media outlets, the story is not told accurately, and you can point to that being a problem for Jewish people. I think that would be the argument.
Okay. So, I mean, this gets to, I think, a lot of the difficulties that let's say, Jews who are sympathetic to Israel and Zionism have like a lot of trouble having these discussions with people who feel differently. And Avi is our resident expert on this right now. Plug for In Good Faith, because he's doing that hard work. But like part of the problem is always like, where do you start the narrative? Right? Like, what's the beginning point? And the beginning point determines the legitimacy of like that side's claims, right? And that's part of what's hard here. So I totally see how this is very problematic in this moment. And this most recent round began with October 7th, according to us. I'm just having trouble here with, I don't see what you have just said, which I think is very valid, articulated in the article or in the statements that these Jewish organizations are issuing. And it looks to me like Jews claiming that they should have editorial authority over the Palestinian narrative. And I think that's a really bad look right now.
I got an email this morning from Sija. Tell Isha Khan, don't erase Jewish voices. The Canadian Museum for Human Rights is about to launch a controversial exhibit, Uprooting Palestine, the Nakba Past and Present. Human rights matter, and so does history. Unfortunately, this exhibit has lacked proper consultation, and amidst the experiences of hundreds of thousands of Jews who were forcibly displaced from centuries-old communities in Israel and across the region. Tell the museum CEO our history must not be erased. So
that feels valid, though, doesn't it?
No. So what I read when I read this is, well, you're telling the story of these people. Yes, we are entwined with these people, but nobody consulted us. I don't know who they consulted, who they didn't consult. They're telling their story, and CJ is saying, well, because you didn't consult us on what we think the Nakba is or isn't, then this is one-sided and a problem. And on top of that, they're conflating Jews being expelled from other lands, which is terrible and horrible and bad. Jews should not have been expelled from Iran, from Iraq, from Tunisia, from Algeria, all these places. But that has nothing to do with the Nakba. And frankly, to go and say, like, this is their story. This is their experience. You don't have to put everybody into everybody's story. Let people tell their own story without you saying, well, you don't have the right to your own story without us coming in on it.
To me, if the telling of the story is inaccurate, like if there are certain historical accuracies that are missed, and if there is a picture that is painted of Israel that is unfair, I understand that it's this idea of speaking to truth, but you can't make things up. I'm not saying – I haven't even seen the exhibit. I'm just, for instancing, we're going down a path here of arguing, right? I'm not saying I know.
Let's wait and see. Maybe we can learn something about the Canadian Palestinian refugee community and their narrative. We don't even know what the exhibit is yet because nobody has seen it. And I anticipate like once the horse is out of the barn and the exhibit is up and thousands and thousands or millions of people visit it, then like that becomes the narrative in their heads. But I don't get a veto over their narrative.
I agree with that too.
So the moment, right, this is happening a particular moment after, Gaza has been.
Yeah, the timing of this is problematic for me because it feels like the world is trying to capitalize on what started with one of the worst atrocities in Jewish history, and I don't need other sides to agree. Like, that's just a fact. Like, this is just – the timing of this 2 years later to me is – I don't know. It feels –
Yeah, but the Palestinians are also in the public imagination right now, and this is their moment. This is their moment to tell their story. They had a terrible tragedy also over the past 2 years, and this is their opportunity to explain to people, their side of why they talk about this idea of a Nakba.
To me, the concern is that too often the telling of this story is problematically done. That's been proven. It can incite violence. This is a national institution. The taxpayers fund this sort of place. Like there's other layers to this. It's not just about like anyone has a right to tell their story. Like there are bounds, there are frames, there are certain ways and processes that safeguard. And if the Jewish community is the one that has to raise it on this one, and it turns out that the story is not being totally followed, like because it's such a topical thing, that's important too.
But let's wait and see.
It would be good if the conversation around it could have some concrete information about what's actually in this exhibit. The speculative nature of all of these kinds of stories, I don't care what your politics are, what side you're on. The fact that we're talking about a thing that we don't know what it is so backwards, is so, as the old people like to say, cart before the horse. Like it's like whether it's this exhibit or anything, like how are we getting so deep into these topics without even knowing what they're about? That's the big problem for me. So yeah, I'm with you. Until we can actually see what's going on, let's wait. Let's wait a second.
Staying in Canada, there's news that has made it actually on some of the larger wire services as well about Jewish charities losing their tax-exempt status. In Canada. Do you want to tell us a bit about this?
Sure. I think the CJN most recently has been reporting about, it seems a pretty small operation, probably out of Toronto, called Garnered Canada, that has been organizing security at various different events and providing Krav Maga Jewish self-defense classes. And going back to 2021, I think they were founded during COVID. And over the course of those 4 years, they've been, it seems, in close contact, or the CRA has been in discussion with them about opening up their books. Anyway, finally, a few weeks ago, CRA revoked their charitable status. And Garnered is actually the fifth such organization over the last year or so. Jewish National Fund in Canada lost their tax-exempt status, and the Masorti movement, I think, also.
Masorti International.
Masorti International in Canada. So this is not a good look. It seems also to be the case that CRA has been investigating these agencies in response to, it seems, a letter-writing campaign from an organization probably with anti-Israel tendencies, called Just Peace Advocacy. And I think it's very important for charitable organizations to have clean books and to be able to clearly demonstrate their charitable giving to the organization that keeps track of all of that. But I also think it's really problematic that CRA is responding to clearly an anti-Israel campaign.
Matthew, do you think that this is doing an anti-Semitism? Or do you think that this is just people responding to malfeasance, and they happen to be looking specifically at Jewish organizations or Israel-based organizations or organizations that do these things?
Can it be both? A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B? Like, are there any other charities that are having their status looked into at the same time and being revoked? I don't know these things.
Yeah,
I'm sure
there are. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes there is a bit of a sort of coincidence going on. If you have a couple of Jewish organizations and they're not keeping very good records, that's a problem. But if there were 4 or 5 different organizations and they were all being dinged for not keeping good records, they should all be dinged for that. But again, Yedida snuck in that comment there. If CRA's attention can be easily grabbed by an organization that is specifically targeting Jewish charities, that's concerning. That is very concerning.
You have to have clean books and everything has to look good. I think the question, right, I think is, are Jews being held to a double standard? And that's where we get into murky territory. So I have no reason to think Jews are being held to a double standard. I do think that their books are being examined more closely because of these letter writing campaigns. So it's a big mess. And, should the CRA be taking up, right? Like, is it being framed in the, like, here's a tip off, or is it, you should go look at these Jewish organizations? Like, how is the framing working? Do you guys happen to know, are there like Jewish counter efforts?
So I was going to ask that. I believe that there are Jewish counter efforts. Do you think that that's a good look for the Jewish community to be doing this in return?
I don't think going after mom and pop shops that are, by which I mean like very small charities that are doing good work in their communities that are, not funding terrorism. Like, I don't think that going after those is a good look by any means. I do think encouraging there to be financial investigations into the oil country funded activism on campus that makes Jewish students very uncomfortable and sometimes turns violent and is full of misinformation and actually is like not serving the Palestinian cause. Yeah, I think that would be a fine thing to investigate.
Okay, let's move on to our main topic for the day. Atra, the Center for Rabbinic Innovation, for whom I know several people that work for them, have released a study of the rabbinate today. And this has been a couple of years in the making. And there are some surprising findings. Matthew, do you want to start us off with some of the things that you found surprising in terms of what they found and what is worthy of talking about?
Other than the fact that we're all rabbis, this is the first time they've really ever done a study into the profession like this, right?
In a while. I believe that there have been other studies of rabbis in the past several thousand years.
Sure. Maybe. Are they recorded in the Talmud, though? I mean, this feels like it was a long time coming, like you said, and something newer, right? To kind of get some concrete data behind what it's like to be a rabbi in North America, right? And it's across all the denominations. It covers all the boards. I think at one point they interviewed 1,500 non-rabbis.
I was going to say, the one thing that it does not include is Orthodox rabbis. They specifically did not do any.
No, it says they do.
From Reform to Conservative and Modern Orthodox.
Oh, Modern Orthodox. They don't cover the traditional Orthodox. Okay.
And the article doesn't say where that line is.
Yeah. So
that's a whole other
the one thing I will
worms.
say is that it's not everything. They do stop at some point right of modern orthodoxy. I'm not sure how they define that. I haven't seen the full-on study, and I should go and read it in detail. But I do believe that they do not cover Haredi communities or any other Hasidic communities.
That would make sense to me too.
Yeah.
Okay. Or Chabad maybe, or something like that, right? Like, so with that, it kind of covers the whole other the rest of us.
The premise, it seems like the background for the commission of the survey seems to have been the assertion that there's a huge rabbi shortage and there's no rabbi pipeline. And the reason I think that seems to be felt is that when synagogues do rabbinical searches, they are either lacking candidates, or they don't have as many applicants as they would hope for, or the applicants that they have are not the rabbis that they imagine on their pulpits. So there's this notion that there's a rabbi shortage, which is perhaps belied by the fact that when there's a Hillel rabbi opening, there are 19 applicants on average.
Right.
So
yes.
There's this question of who imagines themselves to be a rabbi and what kind of rabbinic role do they imagine for themselves, right? And in the course of your 3, 4, 5 years of rabbinical school, that can change, but there are a lot of different rabbinic roles other than just the pulpit. So when a young person, for example, sees the rabbi in their community stretched very thin and all of the politics of the position, perhaps, and I don't mean to harp only on the negative, because somebody may or may not see all of the fulfillment and upside of being a rabbi, but we have to think about what's the rabbinic model that we are setting for young people in, the moments when they're considering what they might do with their lives. Other considerations that the survey pulled out were the cost of going to rabbinical school, relocating to go to rabbinical school, how long rabbinical school takes.
And the first thing that really kind of jumps out in the article says is, first of all, only about half of rabbis are working in pulpits, right? A lot of rabbis are working for schools, for universities, for community centers, for camps, I guess, doing kind of like what I do, working in nursing homes, personal care homes. They're rabbiing outside of the I've got a synagogue, I've got a congregation kind of framework. But it does seem that there's this trade-off. If you work at a synagogue, you get a better paycheck. But in all these other categories of happiness, satisfaction, less stress, demands on your time, schedule, blah, blah, you lose in every category. That the rabbis who don't work in synagogues don't make as much money maybe, but tick off all of those other boxes. That became I would have guessed that anyway, but it felt like a very concrete finding for that. Was that a takeaway for you guys and something surprised, not surprised?
I'm not surprised by it, because like you said, intuitively, I feel it and I get the sense. And I've seen, a lot of rabbi jobs cross my way in the past, decade or two, and the rabbi positions pay enough for the family and the rabbi, whatever, to live in the neighborhood and to be okay. And the non-synagogue positions basically assume that you're going to have a second salary in that household if you're going to actually even want to have a living wage for the family.
Yeah.
that's, generally true for most middle-income families in America today. So there's like a lot of different pieces that go into the decision to be a rabbi or not be a rabbi. I think another sort of interesting data point is that after years of decline, rabbinical school enrollment appears to be stabilizing. So the other interesting thing that we've probably talked about on the show before is sort of the relatively new development in the last, I don't know, Abby probably knows better than me, in the last 20 or 30 years are these sort of like non-denominational rabbinical programs increasingly. And this move towards post-denominationalism, which also like is a different kind of rabbi.
The study also says that most rabbinic students now are women.
Yes, I'm not surprised by that at all. Yeah.
I remember
that is a huge change.
Sure.
My wife told me this. She was in like her year in Israel. It was like a women's yeshiva, and they were talking to the rabbi, and he was like, and they were like, why is it that only men count for the minyan and women don't count for the minyan also? And his response was, because if women counted for the minyan, you know where men would be every Saturday morning? Bowling. Right? This notion that like men have this sense of obligation to do something and they do it, and women want to do it because they want to do it. And the rabbinate is this like calling, but now that's like shifting in this interesting way. And like what's the responsibilities when you're in an egalitarian society? How are things working? Where are people actually like getting desires to do certain things and not? So I do find it fascinating and interesting. Yeah.
Tangentially, there's a really, really, really funny thing about bowling on Shabbos.
When do we play?
Saturday.
Saturday? Well, I have to reschedule.
Walter, what am I going to tell Lebowski?
I told that crowd 1,000 times I don't roll on Shabbos.
Walter.
In The Big Lebowski, in a movie. So like the fact that bowling is specifically referenced in your comment.
I'm Shomer Shabbos. Saturday, Donnie, is Shabbos, the Jewish day of rest. That means I don't work. I don't drive a car. I don't ride in a car. I don't handle money. I don't turn on the oven. And I sure as shit don't roll.
Sheesh.
Shomer Shabbos.
We can get back on track, but yes.
Gentlemen, do you have any amateur Jewish sociologist insight into why the now majority of students in rabbinical programs are women?
I think that there are women who are recognizing that this is their desire to do this. They have a calling and they want to be able to do it. And now that there's finally options available to them, they're, moving forward with it. Why there are more than... I don't know. Is it like the opposite of straight white male syndrome and saying that like as a white male, I don't belong in the pulpit, or nobody's going to give me a job anyway, so I might as well not apply for it. And women are saying this is my time and I want to be able to do it. Maybe that's there. I think there's so many possible angles, and I don't think any one of them are the dominant. I think there's a whole host of factors in that, but I'm not surprised about it at all.
Are women getting senior rabbi jobs in liberal pulpits?
No. In liberal pulpits, somewhat, but not entirely.
Yeah, I think it hasn't turned over yet.
If you look at the modern Orthodox world, where women finally have, for the past 10 years, been getting ordination, even in pulpits where they might be considered for a position, there's a bit of fear around that, and that's a little difficult, and so it's still in the first generation of that. But B, a lot of the desirable pulpits are taken up by young, really compelling, really great rabbis that are male, and they're not going to give up their job just so a woman can have a job. And I'm seeing that happen again and again where, probably the 5-7 places where a woman might be the senior rabbi in an Orthodox community, even if the community was behind it, those rabbis aren't going anywhere. So, and that's true in a lot of liberal denominations also. That's
the sense. Yeah, I was going to say that the sense I get is when you cruise like a city's websites for synagogues, the senior rabbi still seems to be, there may be all these rabbinic students who are women, but the senior rabbis seem still to be men.
Right.
The turnover hasn't happened quite yet. But it's got to be coming.
It'll be interesting to watch it. The other thing that this article, just this short treatment from JTA doesn't talk about that I would be interested in seeing. So Avi, you can report back when you've read the survey in detail. What is a rabbi, right? Like when people decide that they want to be rabbis, what are they imagining that means? Because it means 100 at least different things in different places and communities and so many different roles. So, what are people going to school for?
You mean like what is the work? Like, right? Like your question is like, what is the work of a rabbi? What does a rabbi look like when they are rabbiing? A verb I invented, by the way.
And what do people think that they're training for? Like, what do people think they're going to take this degree to go do?
Correct.
mere weeks before the study came out, and I actually wasn't even aware that the study was happening, I started writing a very long piece really about the gigification of the rabbinate. People who are ministering to people who don't belong in shuls anymore. They don't see themselves as being shul members, and they don't need that, but they still want to be part of a Jewish community. They still want to have Jewish ritual in their life, and rabbis are aware of that. And big shuls, to a lot of the young rabbis going into rabbinical school, isn't where it's at. They don't want to be in big shuls, even though they pay more and they pay well. They say that's the previous generation's form of Judaism. I want to be more independent. I want to be the entrepreneur rabbi. I want to be the one out there doing things for people in a small community, in a smaller way, and figuring that piece out of it, because I really feel called to it, and I don't see myself as having a bureaucratic administrative position.
Right. But Avi, it's not just, I think, the positives about the freedom and the flexibility.
Oh, there's tons of downsides. Yeah.
It's the getting away from the shul system. Regardless of your denomination, the shul system, the dues, the high holidays, the lack of attendance, the where are the young people? It's
the politics.
The politics, the boards. Like people, it's enough of the stuff pushing you away. And this is the thing. Where are we going? Are we going to a world where there are no synagogues? Like, to me, this study is a wake-up call for the synagogues. Half the rabbis don't work in your kinds of institutions.
Even though you're offering them real money.
What? And the money is starting to not be enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough, as one of my friends used to say, headache pay. It's not enough headache pay.
Right.
To be worth it, to become a rabbi in a synagogue. Like, what does this mean for the future of the synagogue in our lifetimes, in our children's lifetimes? Where's the synagogue going? Eventually, if all the rabbis don't want to work at synagogues, people aren't going to be able to go there. They're not going to even need to go there. They're going to go somewhere else. I don't know. Sorry, Adina. What were you going to say?
No, I think this also has a lot to do with economics. Rabbis should be paid well, but it shouldn't be headache pay. It should be a profession. Rabbis should be respected by their communities. And there are plenty of communities where the politics are not terrible, but like being a rabbi still comes with a not small amount of headache. And if you're going to have that much headache and stress, you might as well be a lawyer. You have to have the right. So some people are really called, but I think that this, I don't know if it was a Freakonomics or it was an article, but there's plenty of like literature and research about what happens to a profession when it's opened up to women. Right. And then one of the things that happens is that the pay stagnates. Teachers are not an especially well-paid profession. As women take over the rabbinate, we're also going to see the economics change when I think especially women are in those roles. So I'm not an expert on this, but I do know that there are pay disparities and profession, like some of that disparity has to do with whether or not a profession is dominated by women.
What do you guys think about, Matthew, you're talking about the loss of all of this, like people are walking away from all the bad stuff that synagogues have been, associated with for so long. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to me that the thing that they're supposed to do is the thing that people don't think about, which is create community, build community. Where do you think that community is going to go toward, is going to be coalesce for these people that are walking away from synagogue? Like, I don't like the fact that like people point to Soul Cycle and their yoga class or their, wherever their bowling league, their curling club, AI. Well, community. AI is not a community creator. It's a content. It's a meaning potentially. It has something there that we can talk about with that. But I wonder the role of rabbis in this shift, and I'm curious for where you guys think and how you think about these ideas in terms of creating communities, especially in places where people might not be able to pay you like a living wage because they're just 20 people and say, we need a community, but we don't have the money to create something. So help me think through this stuff.
In the present, I'm kind of benefiting from the fact that I've got this gig at a nursing home and there's a kind of a built-in community there, but it's just really the people who live there that are directly connected. And on Yontif, like I've done 3 Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur now, we get a couple hundred people together, and that definitely, the people who have come 3 years in a row, for sure, that is a community. Like that is something, but it's different because even though you may never go to your synagogue, except for those same 3 days. But, you get the occasional piece of mail, you get the email. Those little things are kind of the reminders that you're in a community. And for a lot of people, that is enough. I think the idea of what makes community is evolving, and the people will tell you. right? Like I'm always a big believer that if you follow the people, they will tell you with their pocketbooks and with their feet. They will go to what they want and what they need, and they will leave what they do not want and what they do not need. And even if you think it's a great idea, when no one signs up for it and no one pays for it, you know it wasn't that great an idea.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
There's not a lot of more science than that. But we have to be innovative. We have to, and I think we have to get beyond the idea. Like it can't just be brick and mortar, but we can't completely get away of brick and mortar because part of community is getting together and seeing people's faces and being able to hug this person or sit next to this person. Like there has to be a physical proximity. I think we learned that during the pandemic. Like virtual only gets you so far. And it's good. Like I would take that over nothing, but you still have to find places where you can get your people in the same space. I think that will always be.
So I think one of the things that we know is happening right now, especially after October 7th, is that Jews are seeking more and more community to come together, right? Like they're identifying on university campuses, more and more young people out in the world, like people are seeking Jewish spaces where they don't have to explain that. Jews are seeking Jewish spaces where they don't have to explain themselves and they are already understood. So the kind of community that you're talking about, Matthew, that like you would be the only convener.
I know.
How do you develop like a lay committee to be part of it with you and brainstorm with you and execute with you? How does this work? How does a Chabad do it? Because it's kind of a Chabad model.
You know what? In a way it is, because like that goes all the way back to like the Baal Shem Tov, and that was like him, and then he had his followers like this, and that's kind of where it all starts, right? But you get in a lay committee, next thing you know, you accidentally start a synagogue with a board of directors, so you got to avoid that.
Let me ask you, Yedida, why did you go to rabbinical school?
So great question, Avi.
Because you have a job.
I was in library.
And you're not necessarily actively thinking about creating a community. What was your thinking, and where is the community? Where's the rabbinate for you? What are you doing as a rabbi?
I went to rabbinical school for a few reasons. Number one, I don't remember what was going on, but my 3-year-old daughter at the time, was like putting her to bed in Nashville, and she like looked up at me and I think totally out of nowhere said, "Women can't be rabbis." And I said, "Yes, they can. And you even know at least one." And she didn't really believe me, but that sort of felt like, oh, okay, now I have to do this. So it felt like a challenge and something that like I needed to model for her. And also, like, I wanted to keep learning. For me, it was like the intellectual engagement with the tradition, continuing to hone my text skills and learn more and have more breadth and more access to other materials that I'd never learned. I go deep into Midrash and Talmud when it's, relevant to my study of medieval Jewish Bible commentary. But like halacha is not something that I'd ever studied at a high level. And I wanted to get better at it. It was like a skills challenge. It was learning how to do something new. Not because I wanted to serve a community, but I do think I realized sort of afterwards that representation is really important. And I never imagined myself as a rabbi, as a young person growing up in Toronto, because I had no woman rabbi within the Orthodox community in Toronto role models, right? And it takes a lot to imagine yourself as something that you can't see. And this is one of, I think, Maharat's catchlines. Mm-hmm. You cannot be what you cannot see. And I just like never imagined that I could be a rabbi. And then later when I was getting my doctorate, I, kept saying to myself, walking the halls at JTS, if I wanted to be a rabbi, I would have gone to rabbinical school. But it was just barely an option when I started my doctorate. So advanced Jewish learning was only available to me, I thought, through the academy at that point.
I love that story, by the way. Just before you ever about to say, Avi, just like you can't be this. And I'm like,
watch me.
Oh, yeah? Just watch me. Love that. I love that.
That's
that story is so powerful.
In the community that we live in now in Washington, D.C., the young women, 19, 20-year-olds, had a woman in a rabbinic role for 10 years until recently. So it's totally their norm, right? Like, they've always had a woman rabbi, and it's total, like it's totally a different universe for them.
By the way, to this whole idea that like you become a rabbi because you're You feel it because you're called, whatever that calling may be, and that if it's open to women, we'll just see more women kind of balance it out. Part of the whole conversation for me is I think that because of the pay and because it was only open to men, I think you had a lot of people attracted to the rabbinate who probably shouldn't have been rabbis. Right? Like it wasn't open to the entire population. Like it's so dangerous. I want to be complimentary. I don't want to say it in the wrong way, but like in spiritual care, there are more women than men. Right? Like there are more women than men. Mm-hmm. Those sorts of disciplines are always viewed as needing a little bit of a warmer side, a softer side, the things that like I don't want to again be into it, like mother's intuition, all this kind of stuff. A female perspective would actually serve, I think, a lot of rabbis very, very well, or at least a more non-just like male-centric, because I think that's what the position has been for so long.
Yeah.
Right? To open it up. You get what I'm kind of trying to get at here is I think there's a lot of
yes and no, and I think that there's danger in moving too much in one direction. This is not. I'm not about
no,
this
for sure.
podcast here.
I'm still a man rabbi, and I feel like I can do it very well.
I have seen when the rabbinate shifts to too much of a feminine model. Just as a rabbinate that is shifting too much to the male model is to the detriment of the community as a whole. The model of everybody wanting to have this empathy and to do the spiritual, the things that you're talking about that are classically understood as women's. When the rabbinate goes too much in that direction, that is also
to me, always balance.
Balance. Yes, yeah. Balance and representation.
I think that the thing that we should be careful about is to recognize and respect the fact that the community is speaking, and the community speaks as a whole, and we don't change the community. The community changes the community, and then the institutions tend to respond. And what people want right now is not to pay for a rabbi as a part of a community, as a synagogue or whatever. And the rabbis that are doing it for a calling, or doing it, like you said, for an advanced degree. That's the way I did it. And I think that there's something about the fact that maybe we can move towards a model which has been in play for probably the majority of the life of the idea of a rabbi is not to have a paid community rabbi position. It's you have somebody who happens to be a rabbi because they did a lot of advanced study. They are doing something else with their life, and they happen to be available to answer halachic questions, to answer liturgical, or to be part of a liturgical team, to do the things that rabbis need to do, and to recognize that the bureaucracy, the MBA parts of the rabbi, that's a relatively recent phenomenon, and maybe we can try to move away from that and say, go get a job, follow your passion, and then also, if you like the Judaism part, like sort of have a dual major and become a rabbi at the same time, and you are going to be able to serve a community of 20 to 30 people who you like because they know you're the rabbi. I had people for the majority of my life as a rabbi, I have had more people call me and ask me questions about halacha, about Jewish ideas, that were just friends of mine. On and on and on again. You probably, both of you have this all the time. You're the rabbi, can I ask you a question? Like, that's my community of people, is the friends that know that I'm a rabbi and trust me enough with the Jewish thing to like ask me a question and to say, thank you, rabbi, thank you, teacher, whatever it's going to be.
I literally got a text while we were taping this show from a guy who was debating a passage in Isaiah. It literally is what you are just describing.
I think at the same time, shuls are convenient places to have services, and somebody's got to run them and keep the doors open and make decisions for them. And
like, if you have to say Kaddish, you can't call your rabbi. You need a community.
I think also, like, most Jews in America today don't have a rabbi on speed dial.
I think they should. And then
I agree with you.
Lesson.
But like, that doesn't mean that they do. Or
we
that
need
they
friends.
Will.
People, can you be friends with us, please? We don't have. We all have lots
Jerry
of friends.
Seinfeld, I got enough friends.
Let's put a pin in this and let us do something rabbinic instead of just talking about the rabbinate. And let's move on to some textual healing.
Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing. Let's get biblical. Tell me a parsha, and we'll make it physical. Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing.
Matthew, Parshat Vayetze. Tell us about Parshat Vayetze and your textual healing for it.
This one is another. I was talking to someone the other day, and I said, You know when you listen to an album by a band like the Beatles and the album feels like a greatest hits album? I feel like Breshit, the book of Breshit, in this part, Parsha after Parsha, it feels like greatest hit after greatest
single.
hit. I mean,
this is a total single. Vayetze is a single with like great parts even within that Parsha.
In this Parsha, Vayetze, Jacob runs away. It starts with Jacob running away, right? At the end of the last Parsha, he deceived Isaac, he deceived Esav, he stole the birthright, he stole the deathbed blessing, he got discovered, Esav wants to kill him and he runs away. And the Parsha opens with his dream, with the ladder, everyone knows the ladder, the angels going up and down. He ends up meeting Rachel and Leah, and he works for Lavan and has all these kids, gets married. All of that stuff happens. But in the part of the story where he gets duped by Lavan and marries Leah instead of Rachel, I love the Midrash because I use this one all the time because every time I do a wedding, I reference that the veil is so that we check under the veil so that we don't get duped like Yaakov got duped when he thought he was marrying Rachel after working for her for 7 years, but Lavan switched Leah. And then the joke is always that must have been some kind of veil if he got duped, right? The Midrash I love is that how was the deception complete? Rachel was in on it, hiding under the bed, and had like given code phrases to Leah so that she could answer Jacob's questions and pass the test. I have the gist, right? Like she basically, Rachel, felt badly for her sister, ostensibly because she was so beautiful, Rachel, and Leah was not. And everyone was always picking Rachel for the dance, including Yaakov, the new guy from out of town. And so she felt badly and went along with it. And that within this story, there is this like genuine, beautiful, sisterly love between these two women who end up becoming the matriarchs of our tradition. And, you know, everyone always just kind of laughs and says, Jacob got duped, blah, 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 blah. But Rachel was in on it. And that part of it to me, I always thought was just so, it just feels like, you know, at the end of the day, even a guy wasn't going to get between her and her sister. And that's just so nice to me. I just love that.
I love it.
My textual healing
where's your
picks
textual
up
healing?
Slightly after Matthew's. As Matthew said, Jacob gets duped into marrying Leah first. And then I think that the text says, or the Midrash says, that a week later, he gets to marry Rachel. So he's got these two new wives. And Leah immediately just starts having kids. So first she has Reuven, like, look, I had a son. And then she has Shimon and Levi and then Yehudah. The rabbis tell us that the matriarchs knew that there would be 4 wives and they knew that there would be 12 sons. So they figured that they would each have 3. So when Leah has her 4th, Rachel starts to freak out. This is all in the Midrash. This is not obvious in the text. And then at the beginning of chapter 30, it says that when Rachel saw that she had borne Jacob no children, she became envious of her sister. And Rachel said to Jacob, "Give me children or I shall die." So this case, the first 3 verses of chapter 30 are one of those places that you now know that I love, where Rashi and the rabbis go to town. They imagine and write a much fuller, bigger conversation. So Rachel comes to Jacob and she can't get pregnant. She's very unhappy. She's watching her sister, who she facilitated that marriage, just have 4 children. And she's like, I might as well be dead. You know, I'd rather die than continue to not have children. Jacob says back to her, am I in the place of God who has denied you, not me, you, fruit of the womb? And the Midrash says that she's really invoking the case of Isaac and Rebekah. So if you look back a generation, it took them 20 years to have children. And it says that Isaac prayed on behalf of Rebekah. And then eventually they had the twins. So if you imagine that when she says, give me children, she's saying, pray for me. He's saying, I can't pray for you because I have children. This is your problem. You need to pray. I can't help you. So then she says, here is my maidservant. Go unto her and she will bear and I will raise the child. And so the rabbis there say, okay, now she's invoking the case of Abraham and Sarah. Because when Sarah couldn't get pregnant, she introduces her maidservant Hagar into the marriage so that Hagar will have a child and she will raise that child. So that's what Rachel is trying to do here. And then that's why right at the end of this, Rachel gives Bilhah to Jacob. And then later, right at the end of the story, after Jacob has died and the brothers are freaking out that Joseph is going to get his revenge, Joseph says to them, am I in the place of God to, this was God's plan. So there's this like interesting note that it's sort of Jacob's sons versus Joseph in the am I in the place of God? Anyway, this is one of those places where there's an enormously expanded conversation that like has a lot more depth and imagines the real relationships in a much more, I think, like realistic kind of way.
You're not alone, by the way, just before Avi, like any place where they imagine these conversations, I love it too. It's great. It feels like the deleted scenes of the Torah. I always love those moments.
I want to go to the very beginning, but also the very, very end, because this Parsha is such a classic example of what Bible scholars refer to as a chiasm, a chiastic structure. And if you're not paying attention to it, you don't see it. Now, for those of you who don't know, a chiasm, a chiastic structure, is when you nest things inside of other things. So ABA, right? The A is on the inside and the outside, the beginning and the end. Then you have ABCBA. So that exists a lot of places in the Torah, right? And it's a classic trope that you see a lot of Bible scholars refer to, especially the religious Bible scholars, because they like to find the literature and the beauty within the text itself and show how it's really beautifully structured. And this Parsha has it. So at the beginning of the Parsha, you have Jacob by himself, and he's on a mountain, with some stones around him, and he falls asleep. And the dream is of angels going and coming. And then at the very end of the portion, Yaakov offers a sacrifice on a mountain. He invites his family to partake of the meal. They set up a mound and a pillar of stones as a witness, as like having a monument. After the meal, they spend the night on the mountain. And then the last thing that happens, Yaakov goes on his way and messengers of God encountered him. And then when he saw the messengers of God, Yaakov says, this is God's camp, and he names that place Machanaim, right? And so all the things that happen at the very beginning, the naming of a place, the being on a mountain, the setting up of a stone structure as a legacy piece, as a piece of remembrance, the angels, one is angels going and coming, and the other one is the angels that are there accompanying him, right? It's all there, and it's all there to heighten the tension. So you say to yourself at the beginning, all he was able to do was observe angels. Here, the angels are going with him. So that clearly that signifies a difference in how he is a changed person, right? There he names it the place of God, right? That's just, a place where this is a place of God. This one is Machanaim. It's God's camps. It's the plural. It's a different way of looking at it. And the more you get into these chiastic structures and seeing the differences as well as the similarities, the more you get into really great Bible scholarship and learning and seeing stuff. So this has always been one of the good ones and one of my favorites.
And Avi, it's a reminder,
I have to say about
that
this Parsha,
whatever you want to call it, like the Torah specifically, the Bible, that this is still to this day, literature-wise, one of the greatest works ever. It's just absolutely incredible.
Sure.
Sometimes things are like, it's been around for forever or whatever. But no, like you can nerd out on this stuff pretty easily, as we show on a weekly basis. But I think for good reason.
Thank you for listening to Not in Heaven this week. Our producer and editor is Zachary Kaufman. Michael Freeman is the executive producer. To catch every episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support our show, consider making a donation to the CJN at thecjn.ca/donate.